We gather today in this house of remembrance to mourn the death and celebrate the life of Richard Glenn Dawson. We have come together in this hour to commit to the sacred keeping of memory, a life that was mingled with our own, the love and wisdom of which remain now to bless us. We meet with sorrow in our hearts and with thankfulness also for the good things of life that we have shared with him who is gone. We cannot choose but acknowledge that those whom we love do indeed depart from us. And when we lose them, no spoken words shall make less our grief. Yet we would be reminded here that what they were can never leave us. The warmth of Dick's presence remains, the joy and curiosity of his mind, the truth. Memories and blended with our thoughts. Those whose lives he touched are diminished by Dick's absence. His dying cuts across the course of our ordinary days, summoning us to pause, to pay tribute, to reach out to other grieving hearts. And so we gather to take account of our common loss, to express our sorrow in the company of those who share it, to affirm the value of a life well lived in mutual affection and integrity. Let this hour then be the confession and celebration of our love, and these rites our testimony to the power of love and friendship and remembrance, which shall be finally stronger than sorrow or parting. Here, amid the companions of our sadness, let our memories lose their bitter edge, so that they become for us a sacred bond to Dick and all that he held dear, to the source of the life and the world in which he had his being, and to whose everlasting rhythm he is now returned. The spirit of love, if we are to find it ever, must be found within ourselves and in the connections that we share, the ideals to which we give our devotion, the habits of mind and heart that we practice, such as reason, generosity, creativity, and hope, illuminate the world even when our individual lives reach their inevitable close. We kindle this chalice flame as a symbol of our continuing commitment to these ideals. Here, in the midst of this covenant community, may our sorrow measure the truth of our love. May we enshrine in memory all that was best in him and carry his influence as a lasting summons to our own better selves. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kendall Gibbons. I am the senior minister here at the All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, which has been for many years Dick and Ellie's religious community. Today, we will be sharing in readings and music and in memories from some among us, moments of Dick's life and the meaning that he has had and continues to have for all those who cared for him. We thank each of you for being here to offer your support and consolation to the family. We urge you to wear your mask consistently while indoors here in the sanctuary and the foyer for the protection of all present. And we invite you to join us for refreshments and informal conversation at the conclusion of this service. This is how it's going to go. We will have some memorabilia to look at and time for conversation out in the foyer. Please keep your masks on in here or out there unless you are speaking from the pulpit. And then you can walk down the hallway to Conover where our Demeters have laid out some refreshments, and you're welcome to remove your mask and partake of those out on the patio or in Conover. But if you prefer to remain in a masked area, the foyer and Bragg should be masked. Dick was a committed song leader and singer who loved the music of Pete Seeger. And so we begin with this message from his work. Dick also loved the music of poetry and sought to express his own experience of nature and being human in words like these, taken from a poem he called "Lying Under a Tree in the Environmental Lab Instead of Running Around Getting Students to Tend to Business." He said, "Can these textures and colors and shapes and sounds and smells and nibbles and flats and rounds and fats and thins and growings and dyings and burrows and droppings, the rabbit's fluff a hawk has left, the prickly swirl of a coneflower head, the hourly flaming change of creeper, the volatile taste of bursting berries, be pressed into words like a leaf collection? On a day like this, I have to sit in the sun and just be autumn. Absorb without reservation, just answer yes to the miracle called human and the world that gave me ears and skin and eyes and nose and tongue and brain and memory. No photograph, recording, painting, word of remembrance can really capture an October afternoon. I can only live a few nameless, timeless breaths of now. No less renowned a poet than Mary Oliver offers the same challenge in her reflection on the summer day. She writes, "Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous, complicated eyes. Now she lifts up pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel in the grass and to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Let it be a dance with you. May our hands dance with you. Through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Let a dancing song be heard. Play the music, say the words, and fill the sky with sailing birds. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Learn to follow, learn to lead. Feel the rhythm, feel the need. To reap the harvest, plant the seed. Let it be a dance. Everybody turn and spin. Let your body learn to bend. And like a willow with the wind. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. A child is born, the old must die. A time for joy, a time to cry. Take it as it passes by. Let it be a dance. Morning star comes out at night. Without the dark there is no light. If nothing's wrong then nothing's right. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let the sunshine, let it rain. Share the laughter, bear the pain. And round we go again. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance with you. May our hands dance with you. Through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance.
Dick Dawson was descended from a long line of unique individuals, sometimes known as real characters. It should be no surprise that he became one himself. He was the only child of his parents, Philip Glenn Dawson and Velma Gertrude Clatterbuck Dawson, and grew up close to his two cousins, Judy Dawson and Jim Powell. Dick's father, Philip, was born in Columbia, Missouri, and signed up for the Army just weeks before the end of World War I in Europe. After his service, he moved to Fulton, where he worked as a mail sorter on the railroad and met his future wife. Velma grew up in Fulton, where many of her friends and family heard Winston Churchill deliver his famous Iron Curtain speech at Westminster College in 1946. Following her death in 2004, members of the family all agreed they don't make them like her anymore. Also influential in Dick's life were his mother's good friend Mildred, with a reputation for wearing lipstick, but nevertheless being a super sweet person. And Lorna Jackson, a sophisticated early American antique dealer known to the family as Aunt Dune, who was a kindred spirit with Dick. His grandfather's sisters, Myrtle and Golden Daniels, also lived nearby in Kansas City while he was young, and later moved out to Missouri farm country. And there was Uncle Pearl, remembered for his expressive grunting. Dick was raised as an American Baptist, the liberal wing of the denomination, and received a scholarship from the Baptist Convention, which enabled him to choose Carleton College in Minnesota for his undergraduate work. Knowing that he joined the Audubon Society when he was in 8th grade, it makes sense that he immediately joined the Natural History Club at Carleton, and it was there that he met another Baptist scholarship recipient, Ellie Webster, several times apparently before he actually noticed her. After they graduated and were married, they moved to the Kansas City area, where Dick began a 42-year career teaching at Shawnee Mission High Schools. Ellie went to work in the office of a doctor who was a member of All Souls and invited them to attend several forums. The birth of daughter Andrea motivated them to make a formal commitment to the church community for her religious education in 1963. And since then, both Dick and Ellie have been active in many forms of leadership and service here at All Souls. Until lately, Dick had become our photographic historian. His ubiquitous camera, his love of teaching, his sense of humor, and his delight in the natural world will all be much missed.
There's so much I can say about my dad that I can't possibly fit it all in today. He loved the natural world so much that he joined the Audubon Society in 8th grade from a family not especially into nature. He followed that love to a biology degree from Carleton College and a long teaching career. He loved teaching and his students so much, innovating classes like environmental problems and world futuristics, and creating the Shawnee Mission Environmental Science Laboratory, or SMEASL. I think he was called to teaching, like some people are called to ministry, and many of students have said that he was their favorite teacher. I remember him typing up so many letters of recommendation. He typed really fast. And he has kept in touch with many students for decades and visited them across the country and sometimes all over the world. He founded and directed the Camp Hope Environmental Science Camp in Swope Park, and we lived there until I was 10. Those were great times. Our nearest neighbors were squirrels, a fox, and a 16-inch reflector telescope my dad had the key to. He taught me so much I take for granted. the names of all the trees and the common and some not so common birds, the constellations and the stories behind them, how to identify tracks and scat, and most of all, just a joy in this lovely planet. At campfires, he would imitate prairie chickens, Chuck Will's widows, whippoorwills, and a spectacular fight, or maybe it was a mating, between two barred owls, which I think I had him repeat for me just a couple years ago. I could even probably do these imitations myself right now. I won't, but I could. Being raised at this camp with him as my father, jumping around and imitating birds, I got over being embarrassed really young. By the time other kids in middle school were embarrassed to even have parents, I was already over it. He did keep trying, though. Right here in this room, I have fond memories of him introducing me as a returning visitor to this congregation by saying that I like to drink vinegar. One of the most embarrassing moments he wasn't even there for. I was in junior high and struggling to find a topic for a science project. Finally, the teacher gave me this booklet about how to pick a topic, written by my dad. I remember the music. He didn't play an instrument, but there was always singing. Even just driving around in the car, we would sing. At camp, we would sing after every meal, and other times too. So many songs, from the folk revival, but so very many others. A history he wrote about the camps says that a lot of the songs had been brought back from a conference where Pete Seeger was a speaker, and it showed. Pete was always a special favorite, and so when Friends of the Earth did a rafting trip down the Hells Canyon of the Snake River with Pete as guest naturalist, my parents jumped at the chance. My mom jammed on flute with Pete Seeger, and they were there for the birth of a song. Decades later, at the Folk Alliance, I got a hug from Pete Seeger, just based on this connection. Probably he would have hugged me anyway. Because he was a teacher, he had summers off. The first part was camp, but then we would take off and drive across the country camping. When I was 12, we drove to Alaska from Kansas City. So by the time I was grown, we had visited almost every state but Hawaii, which would be a wet drive. He and my mom continued those journeys after my sister and I were grown, visiting places as far-flung as the Arctic Circle, Borneo, Japan, Cambodia, Uganda, Trinidad and Tobago, and the Galapagos. They participated in Earthwatch expeditions in Texas, Mexico, Hungary, Thailand, and Mongolia, doing things from observing elephant behavior to measuring the biggest bighorn sheep to the tiniest migratory birds to counting black widow webs on cactus. And besides traveling, we also did a lot of canoeing, including a family tradition of canoeing on Thanksgiving weekend. Besides a memorable trip to the Boundary Waters, memorable especially because it rained something like the first 5 days out of 7, almost all the canoeing was in the beautiful Ozarks of southern Missouri with the Ozark Wilderness Waterways Club. We had such fun on those canoe trips, except that one Thanksgiving when I was 3 and we tipped over. I have such wonderful memories of paddling beneath beautiful bluffs, exploring caves and springs, and shooting rapids. He and my mom raised us to be committed to social justice. We moved to the 4963 neighborhood in 1974, deliberately choosing an integrated neighborhood that had resisted racial blockbusting, and seeing the inequities between the educational opportunities in the Kansas City, Missouri school district and the public schools where my dad taught in the Kansas suburbs, they also signed my sister and me up as plaintiffs in a pro-school desegregation lawsuit that went all the way to the Supreme Court. With their encouragement, we also both graduated from Lincoln High School, the historically black public high school in the Kansas City area. I will always be proud to have graduated from a school with that history. He and my mom joined All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in Kansas City in 1963, And so my sister and I were raised in the loving and thoughtful arms of this church. The emphasis on the free and responsible search for truth and meaning has influenced who I am more than I consciously know. For as much as he took center stage as a teacher and at camp, he was also a tireless behind-the-scenes process person, the one you wanted as your organization's secretary. He served as secretary or newsletter editor for many organizations, from All Souls to nature organizations like the Missouri Prairie Foundation. And I remember helping him collate, fold, staple, and label many, many newsletters. He was sometimes, let's say, avant-garde as a teacher. From wearing t-shirts with animals and even their scat. He arranged those t-shirts in his drawers by phylum, by the way, to drinking water and calling it recycled dinosaur pee, and to telling students that when they entered his class, they didn't know shit, and making sure by his elaborate lessons in animal scat, by the end of his class, they knew shit. And a lot of his students remember the music he played before and between classes, from Mr. Rogers' "Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine, your body's fancy, and so is mine," to the Moody Blues and Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. A lot of those albums in the later years were mine, by the way. But in his personal life, he was very much a rule follower. If the speed limit was 55, he would drive exactly that, certainly no faster. And he was also extra cautious. Like when he was teaching me to drive, he kept screaming, "Watch out!" I didn't get my license till I was 27. He was a born documentarian. He was always taking pictures, starting with boxes and boxes of slides, and even multimedia slideshows, like the ones I remember on water pollution and philosopher Teilhard de Chardin, and then even more extensively in digital format. He really liked to make a photographic record of whatever was going on. At family gatherings, he would always be lining us up to pose for the camera, something that was kind of irritating at the time, but we are so grateful for the pictures now. A couple of years ago, he arranged and printed out a family photo album of hundreds of photos. So grateful for these now, too. And if that weren't enough, he was a wonderful artist and poet. He started drawing and painting as a young child, and his many paintings, of birds especially, and their natural settings, evoke such memories of him and of places we have been. The nearly life-size Missouri tree and Swope Park scene he painted me is something I will treasure always. What I especially remember about my dad is that he didn't treat me like a kid. He treated me like a person and respected my thoughts and opinions. He took the time to explain things to me and also showed he cared what I thought. I felt like we were exploring the world together. Oh, Daddy, I will so miss going through the world with you. I love you always.
Hi, my name is Linda Ladden. I've known Dick Dawson since 1964, when I took his biology class at Shawnee Mission North. A fellow student, Susie Dillman, and I used to babysit Andrea and Carolyn when they were toddlers, sometimes at the Lakeside Nature Center. Dick and Ellie, famous for their wonderful nature travels, visited me twice. Once when I lived in Tokyo, and again when I moved to Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, we ate copious amounts of dim sum and went on a dolphin watching tour where we saw the endangered pink dolphins in the Hong Kong ship channel. I was hoping they would visit me here in France, but sadly that won't happen. Whenever I visited my family in Kansas City, I would stop by 5804 Charlotte to see Dick and Ellie and the latest rescue dog. I was always welcomed with a pot of tea. Once Dick handed me a snake as I walked in the door. Fortunately, I love snakes. One of my favorite memories was attending Dick and Ellie's 50th wedding anniversary party. There was a crowd of people, friends, family, former students, all very fond of Dick and Ellie. We all love them for our own special reason. Dick will be much missed.
Dear Mr. Dawson, on your memorial service, July 11th, I wanted to honor you by reading a poem, Remember, by Joy Harjo. Remember the sky you were born under, know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon, know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn, that is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evident of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father, he is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth, we are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them, they are alive poems. Remember the wind, her voice, no, she knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people, and all people are you. Remember you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember language comes from this. Remember the dance language is, that life is, remember. I will always remember you.
I first encountered Dick when I was an 11-year-old first-year science camper at Camp Hope. I don't remember the details of his talk that first morning in the dining hall, but I do remember for sure that I didn't want to stop listening. And I remember, as many of us do, his introduction to the forest's nighttime sounds as we sat around the opening night campfire. Through my years as a camper, JC, and senior levels of the camp staff, Dick was part of the experience. It wasn't until I entered my middle years that I realized he was one of the larger influences on my life. Dick taught me, well, us, more than the names of trees and birds and things that wiggle in the mud. I came to appreciate that Dick was teaching by the power of example things that have lasting importance. I saw in his actions the strengths of leading from kindness, acceptance, and seeking consensus. I learned how much our lives benefit from rigorous evaluation of our successes, and that assessing disappointing results leads us to the foundations for growth. Those lessons learned became ideals that have guided my work and shaped my relationships with the planet and with my fellow travelers on it. Gifts that will last long in my memory. Thank you, Dick.
Hi, my name is Sarah Baker. I am Dick and Elle's niece. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. metro area, and Dick and Elle, of course, live in Kansas City, Missouri. But I feel very fortunate that I was still able to spend so much time with Dick because my grandparents had a cottage in Minnesota, and our two families would always gather there in the summertime. So I have a lot of fond memories of Dick canoeing, swimming in the lake mostly, and always taking photographs. And I just remember him as a very exuberant, fun person to be around. No matter what we were doing, I have one specific memory of another aunt of mine on the other side of the family was trying to get rid of the last piece of pie, a piece of tomato pie, a savory pie, and saying, I need somebody to eat this last piece, and coming up to my Uncle Dick and him saying, no, I couldn't possibly eat it, as he was putting it onto his plate. And I thought that was very funny at the time. Yeah, so a lot of warm memories with Dick, and unfortunately the past 10 to 15 years I've got to see Dick a lot again on the holidays, and just a warm, loving presence in my life, and I know I'll think of him often and remember him fondly.
Jason Shadinix, a member of the Shawnee Mission South class of 2000, shares these reflections. I had the pleasure of taking 3 of Mr. Dawson's classes when I was in high school. In fact, I was one of the last students he had in his teaching career, as he retired after having me as his AP biology class my senior year. I'd like to think his choice to retire was because after having me in class for 3 years, he felt there was no way his teaching career could possibly improve at that point, so he figured he might as well retire. If I'm honest with myself, though, based on the fact that he once put a comment on my report card that read, "Potential exceeds level of effort," there were probably other factors in play as he decided to retire after 2020. Whatever his motivation to retire was, he was certainly one of the most influential teachers for me in high school. His unique teaching style always left me looking forward to class. You never knew what would go on once you got into his classroom. One day you might be dissecting a various critter to learn what things look like inside. Other days you may spend the entire class outside in the outdoor environmental science lab, SMEASL, that he was instrumental in creating, learning more than you could ever learn by reading books. Or you might find yourself doing various biology lab activities that I'm fairly certain involved equipment and supplies that he had obtained using his own money. Still, other days you might be listening to one of his lectures that would leave you chuckling as you left class. He had a unique delivery method that came across as more of a conversation than a lecture, combining facts, amazing drawings of nature, jokes, and amusing stories that allowed you to better retain information. He always had music playing before and after class, and had his walls, cabinets, and lab area decorated with his art, poems, and interesting quotes. My favorite biology quote he would hang up would have to be, "Time's fun when you're having flies," by Kermit the Frog. 2 particularly humorous stories that have stuck with me through the years come to mind in particular. One spring day, the class was sitting in total silence taking a test when one poor young lady in the class accidentally let one rip. Without missing a beat, Mr. Dawson put a pause on the test, grabbed a piece of chalk, and proceeded to have a totally ad-libbed lesson on the human digestive system and the science of farts. His methods may have been unconventional, but one cannot underestimate the power of using body humor and poop stories to help high school students remember facts in a biology class. Later that year, on one of the last days of class before we graduated, Mr. Dawson had a rather unique awards ceremony to help us reflect on our achievements in that year's class. We each received a customized award recognizing a specific accomplishment. Mine read, "By virtue of having achieved the highest total points of any senior or any man in the 2000 AP biology class, be it hereby proclaimed that Jason Shadinix does know shit." He proudly read us our accomplishments and handed us our awards one by one, managing to find something unique to award each student to remind us that we know shit. Even the one student who frequently failed to show up to class or complete assignments got an award, though his read "doesn't give a shit" instead. After graduation, Mr. Dawson was one of the very few teachers I kept in touch with through the years, and I always looked forward to the Christmas cards he would send every year without fail. They would include amazing art and pictures of what he'd been up to in the past year. I'm not sure how he managed to keep track of my address as I moved around after school, but somehow he did. They will be missed, but I'm glad I had the privilege of knowing him. I grew up with a parent, grandparent, aunts, uncles, and cousins who were educators in various capacities, so I know firsthand the sacrifices a teacher makes for their students, and that it can sometimes lead to limited family time during the school year. Mr. Dawson will be forever remembered by myself and the thousands of students that were fortunate enough to be molded by him in class through the years. To Mr. Dawson's family, like many others, I'm not able to be present today, but know that you are in my thoughts, and I feel like I'm a better person for having known Mr. Dawson. He would often speak of his family in class, and you could tell that he was proud of all of you. Thank you for allowing me to share these memories today. The sages of many of the world's great spiritual paths remind us that grief is the necessary counterpart to the joy of love and human connection. The deeper our sorrow, the more has been that which is taken away. They who embrace and affirm life willingly invite this grief as the risk taken in owning the fullness of life and companionship. So we learn to possess our sorrows as the measure of our love. Moreover, it is well for us to speak of those qualities which we treasured in our friend, for by speaking of them, they become somehow vital and enduring and grow into us, so that we take on what was noble and become more noble ourselves. Thus, we pause now to share in this company of tender recollection a few of the memories that we here carry of Dick, how he touched your life, what he meant to you, and how his legacy will abide with you. Please come forward, either to the pulpit or the mic on the floor, so that you don't interrupt the participation of those who are with us virtually. In order to use our time equitably, when you hear the music start, that will be your signal to bring your remarks to a close. Is there some? Chip is going to be our last speaker, I believe. Come on up, Claudine.
At the season of Christmas of the year, I was always looking forward to something that I received from Dick. It was always a new bird. Although I belonged to the Audubon with Dick, he knew things I didn't know at all. And he knew how to draw them and to make them real. And this is the only one I could get hold of right today. And this was 1987. And I received one of these every Christmas, and I will miss receiving them.
So I met Dick in 2009. It was the 50th anniversary of the Ozark Wilderness Wildlife Club float trip. And so he got shoulder surgery and couldn't go and couldn't participate. So Ellie asked me to. So we go down there. And riding with them in their van, they've got every NPR station in Missouri, which is just amazing, so they switch it out. But every morning we would wake up and you'd hear the birds, and he'd tell you exactly what bird it was, who was making the sound, and they'd be like, oh, the males have this kind of coloring, the females, and he just knew it. And it was amazing because you were on a science field trip, but you could drink beer, and it was great. And I will say with Ellie as well, canoeing, she would point out every single flower and tell you, what the scientific name was, common, whether it was, native and whatnot. So, I mean, it was just amazing, and it's been an amazing relationship since then.
I'm Dave Van Dyne. I feel like I might be part of the family now after hearing that some relative has expressive grunting capabilities. So I did not know that. I excelled at that. Anyway, I have some memories of Dick Dawson. Dick Dawson was a big influence on my young life. Saturdays at Camp Hope, starting as an 8-year-old exploring the natural world, paddling rivers with the Ozark Wilderness Waterways Club as a young man, young child. Science camp summer sessions filled with diverse topics ranging from botany to zoology. Dick shared freely his curiosity and enthusiasm, knowledge, and love for nature. At summer camp evening lectures, Dick exposed us to difficult topics such as our own mortality or environmental issues, but also raucous discussions and renditions of bird calls. And to this day, I can't hear a whippoorwill or Chuck Will's widow nor a barred owl without thinking of Dick Dawson and seeing him performing these calls in person. Memorable science camp field trips included geology studies at road cuts, witnessing of a fish kill along some forgotten backwater, and rambles out on hot prairies during the months of June and July. I had no idea during my youth in the 1960s that Dick Dawson was hard at work with the long view of preserving the remnant prairies of Missouri. I was pleasantly surprised to meet up with Dick in 2015 at the dedication of the Missouri Prairie Foundation's Snowball Hill Prairie. It was then that I learned more about his involvement in MPF's creation. Carol Davitt, executive director, provided these remarks. Dick Dawson was a founding member of the Missouri Prairie Foundation, which is now 55 years old, and in that role made significant contributions to the organization's ability to protect prairie. Among his many roles with the Missouri Prairie Foundation, Dick served as secretary on the board of directors, and his daughter, Andrea, remembers helping him collate, fold, staple, and label many, many newsletters. The Missouri Prairie Foundation is extremely grateful for Dick's love of prairie and his hard work, which contributed to the success of the organization. He was a pioneer throughout his life in so many positive ways, and in fact, several years ago, the Missouri Prairie Foundation established an award in his honor, the Dick Dawson Prairie Pioneer Award, which recognizes an individual or business who has made an outstanding contribution as an early promoter or leader to the cause of prairie conservation. Thank you, Dick, for your love of life and your love of prairie. You will be greatly missed. As I look back on Dick and think about his unselfish generosity, I see someone who knew that there was plenty of all of nature to share. Thank you to Dick and his family for all of the untold labors involved in creating such wonderful experiences for so many of us. It made a difference. Thank you.
I'm Jan Alderson. My husband and I have known Dick for so long, and his presence was always in our life early on as educators. We were both educators in Raytown. And then I was really privileged to take Dick's position at South, what big shoes to fill. He helped us with our interaction newsletter that went out to 2 different states. He was in all these environmental groups. We kept crossing paths there. Lakeside Nature Center with our program, he crossed paths with Dick with that. I mean, his presence, you know, the old saying about teachers make a difference, you never know where your influence stops. And he truly affected so many lives. It was such a privilege for my husband and I to have known him. I wasn't prepared to make a comment, but I thought I would today. Thank you.
Both of my daughters are graduates of the UU, or the All Souls Church School. And in those days, far off as they are, it was a 2-hour session, and each girl in turn had Dick as a teacher. One time, not very long ago, the 3 of us were talking about those long gone days, and I said, well, what did you learn in church school? And they looked at each other and grinned, and one of them said, well, we learned a lot about amoebas.
My name is Carla Orner. I was Carla Dias when I first met Dick. I started going to science camp when I was 12 or 13. Whenever they would first let you in, I couldn't remember what age it was. I became a counselor in training and went to all the way through until you had to live in Missouri, and my parents would move for me to get a counselor job. But when I started high school, I was going to Shawnee Mission South, and I was thrilled my first year to find out that Dick was going to be my biology teacher. I walked in the room to what everyone said, the music and the sounds and the animals. And Dick said, so glad you're here. And as he started introducing everybody and telling them about the class, he said, I've known Carla for a long time. And we're going to do a lot of things in this class, and nothing is going to hurt you, and we're going to prove that. And he reached into his terrarium and picked up a tarantula and walked it over and put it on my arm. And it started walking up. And I'm looking at Dick. I have to say one thing about him is you would look at him and he'd kind of give you this look like, and you knew you were going to be okay. He grabbed it as it got up to my shoulder. I became a teacher's assistant there. When he started teaching ecology, I was a teacher's assistant for that. Worked out in the schmeasel. My favorite thing in the ecology class was that wasn't really a word that most people knew in this late 60s. And so people had no idea what they were going to learn. But the first test, he handed it to me as the teacher's assistant and said, go ahead and grade those. And I said, where's the key? And he went, you've been coming to camp for 4 years and you don't know the answers yet. I was like, okay. He was such an encourager. He led you to believe you could do anything, and whatever you set your mind on, you could do it. I ended up with a career in science, and I attribute it to Dick, and have done some wonderful, wonderful things, and have always looked on to him as a mentor. It's been great hearing from him over the years, and he will really be missed.
I'm Kate Ann Hunter, also met Dick through camp and through the church. What I'd like to say is that the camp meant so much to me because in the 60s, it was a place where a girl who cared about science could be herself. And that was really the only place I could do that. And I think of Dick every week when I go out at night and my guy says, don't you want a flashlight? I said, no, you can see better without a flashlight. And not only is that so true in nature, but also a metaphor that I carry with me every day.
like a lot of people here, well, I'll introduce myself. I'm Barbara Banfield. Like a lot of people here, I met Dick through camps. I went there from, I think, the first 1969 it started, and went there. I remember the tears in my eyes when I turned 13, because that last session, the last day, I remember singing, we sang a lot, made, the Circle Game by Judy Collins, thinking, oh, I was growing out of camp because I couldn't come back, but then I was invited back as a volunteer, and so grateful to then go on and work there. And, I went on to become, just retired from 35 years as a naturalist, and I think I went on to teach kids, and I felt like there was like a continuity of, sharing what I learned, and not even knowing lessons that I consciously learned, because I remember describing, somebody saw a bird and they were telling me about it, and I kind of described it the way it was described in bird guides, but then I was also doing and it did this little thing, and I imitated. They went back and they went on a walk, they saw the bird again, he said, look just like you. And I've never seen, that was so helpful. And I just realized today that, don't everybody describe birds by showing what they do with their tail and how they bob? And, it just seemed natural. It's because I had a good naturalist education with Dick. And, I'm so grateful for it. And, I always felt like I could never live up and create what I got from him, because it was such a wonderful experience. And I got a lot of knowledge of the natural world there. And I can even remember, like, the first summer there, the first hike out from the dining hall down a trail, and we stopped places. I think he'd even made some signs that said Oak Hickory Forest, Oak Hickory Community. And we were talking about communities, like there were natural communities within the landscape and how there was community there. But what I realize now is that he also built community of people that had a connection to nature, a community of friends, a community that, like, we learned more about compassion and getting to know each other. And some of the best friends I have, I don't see them often, but it's like the community I'm still part of that community, and I feel it was like one of the greatest gifts I got from him. And I'll miss him.
Hi, my name is Susan Hubbell, and I might be one of those people that you might have to cut off. Thinking about the memories of Mr. Dawson, it was really hard to condense. I was a student at Mr. Dawson's at South. He retired after my junior year. It feels cliche to say that he was my favorite teacher, but he really was. To say he was my favorite teacher is an understatement. He was one of my most favorite humans of all time. He inspired my personal love of education and history, my obsession with vinyl records, my enthusiasm and appreciation for photography, my love of the tranquility and chaos of nature and hiking, and a feeling of commitment to my community. Born and raised in Johnson County, I led a rather boring, sheltered life, and I'm so grateful for the day I was assigned to Mr. Dawson's Biology 101 class my freshman year of high school. Little did I know how much that would influence my adolescent brain. I was about to be introduced to realms of thinking I didn't know were possible. Actually, today I drove by Smeasel and Swope Park and the Lakeside Nature Center, and it just brings back so many memories, and I still visit there often. I wish I could get into Smeasel, but it's locked. I'm always flooded with memories of Mr. Dawson whenever I go to those areas, and I'll just share a few. I might not have time. I remember his classroom at South, the overwhelming feeling of walking into his world the first day of high school. I was wide-eyed and terrified, but I eventually learned that I fit in quite well, even though biology was not my strong suit. It was a typical science lab type setting, but it was so much more. It wasn't just stacked with biology textbooks, but stacks of his own personal books. I remember the plants. His room seemed really humid. There were so many plants. The condensation would drip on cold days. I remember jars filled with formaldehyde and who knows what inside. His cow pies and tissue samples, things I was afraid to touch. And I can't forget the millions and millions of slides. So many mornings of slides. I always loved those slides, though. It could get tedious going through them all, but it's a memory I cherish. And I can't forget the record player. He would put on music during passing periods and sometimes during class. The sounds of Pink Floyd and the Sex Pistols, Native American chants, acid jazz to blues and folk. Whatever it was, I liked it. I've heard of people at South who didn't have Mr. Dawson as a teacher, but they remember that music. I remember his teaching style. He was the smartest person I had ever encountered. He was loud, he was soft, he was captivating, he was no holds barred, no bullshit. He stood on chairs. He would slap the chalkboard with a ruler. He would sing passionately. He liked to get us out of our comfort zone. I loved it, even though, like I said, I'm not good at biology. I absorbed the historical knowledge that he carried. I cared more about his knowledge about the history of systematic racism in Kansas City and the civil rights movements and how the city developed than I did about identifying trees, sorry. I got the worst grades in Mr. Dawson's class, but I loved it the most. I once got a test back mark with a big G on it, and after class, I asked him what it was about because I was confused. And he simply said, you received a less than failing grade, and went on about his day. I'm sure I huffed off to my next class. Near the end of my junior year, he angrily asked me and a few of the other students in class to stay after, like we were in trouble, and I was terrified. My heart sank. But after everyone had left, he was all smiles and hugs. We were there to, he wanted to give us some books. I don't know if we got all the same book or not, but he ended up giving me Sigurd Olson's Songs of the North that I still cherish to this day. I didn't know his love of canoeing at the time, but I would know it later, and definitely through reading this book. I feel like I've been going on forever, and I haven't even brought up Smeasel or when they asked him to teach creationalism. I remember when the state of Kansas mandated that the theory of creationalism be taught in public schools, and I remember Mr. Dawson reading us snippets of emails from colleagues around the world. The basic message to us was that the mandate was a joke and we were being laughed at from around the globe. Then he gave us some bullet points about creationalism for about 10 minutes, and then we moved on back to real science. I wasn't aware he had founded Smeasel when I was a student, but I knew it was special. I loved classes, hiking the trails, having access to the pond and the forest, the stream and the prairie, looking for scat and tracks, testing pH levels in the pond water, studying all the flora and fauna, taking the elementary school kids that were on field trips. We, the students, would guide them around. It was awesome because we got to pass our knowledge that he had given us to the younger generations. Sometime later, I don't know exactly how it happened, but it was after I graduated. I was about 19 or 20 or so. Dick invited me to spend the day with him and going around to different places in Kansas City. I remember meeting him very early in the morning at his house, and I remember thinking how cool it was to be going to Mr. Dawson's house. I remember it being filled with stuff, but what I mostly remember are the paintings on the walls. Our adventure started on the trails of Swope Park that I assume were part of Camp Hope, and we made our way to Lakeside Nature Center. At that time, I wasn't aware of his role in getting that up and started, but now every time I pass it, I can't help but think about him. We ended up making our way to Caw Point, which was my first time going to Caw Point. where we met some people from his canoeing club who were reenacting the Lewis and Clark expedition. It was so much fun watching him interact with his old canoeing friends down by the confluence of the Kansas City and the Missouri rivers. I was also very worn out after that day and very sunburnt. At the end of that day, he gave me a field guide of the Swope Park area that's out front to remember some of the places that we visited. Even though we traveled much further than Swope Park, that field guide has always stayed near and dear to my heart, and I actually brag about it to this day. I look at it often. Looking back, I probably should have brought a notebook and a pen to catch every detail of the knowledge he was unfolding in front of me. We stayed in touch. I loved his yearly letters about his adventures. And when I got married, he gave us a painting entitled In the Sandias, which is where I got married outside of Albuquerque. I display it proudly in my living room. It's probably one of my most prized possessions. But I'll end reading his own words. He may have said this to everyone, but I always felt it so personal. He said, "For Susie, in appreciation for all the things you have been, done, and thought and dreamed that have made my time with you happy and memorable, remember, whatever happens to life on earth is your responsibility. If you screw up, we may not have a fourth millennium. Love, Dick."
I'm Jill DeWitt, and Dick preceded me as president of Burroughs Audubon and was such a formative influence in conservation and the formation of the Prairie Foundation and Lakeside Nature Center and other things that we worked on together. I treasure service on boards devoted to conservation work and have so much love for Ellie and your family in my heart. They're truly wonderful people. Indomitable, courageous, lively, and truly a pleasure to have known. I count participation with Dick in all these ventures among the highest pleasures of my life. This self-described archgeezer of conservation will always remain in my memory and be a part of my most treasured experiences. Thank you so much.
Okay, I said I wasn't going to do this, but...
Those were the second and third most enthusiastic barred owls I have ever encountered. I am Chip Buckner. I'm one of the science camp kids, but I started as one of those really obnoxious astronomy nerds. And Mom told me that some guy out at Swope Park was teaching a course on astronomy, and I had to be there. So we went out. I'm 10, maybe. We go out to a part of Swope Park that I didn't know existed. We turned on an unmarked road, wove through all these trees on a windy road, came to a big sign that said Camp Hope off to the right. We turned right, continued winding through the trees, and came to this big screened-in building that said Camp Hope Dining Hall. It was a place filled with posters of turtles and frogs and snakes and leaves and clouds and everything else a little boy could absolutely fall in love with. It was really wonderful. I had entered the world of Dick and Ellie Dawson. I think it was the second night in class when Dick started by asking us, how far away is the moon? Could you hit it with a rock? Where does the rock go after you throw it at the moon? Well, Why? Could you hit the moon with a rocket? And that was an open question in those days. Could you hit the moon with a rocket? Well, then how is a rocket different from a rock? Well, if the rocket went up and came back down and missed the Earth and the Earth's gravity kept pulling on it, what would happen to the rocket? And would it continue to move with the Earth? And how does that differ from what the moon does with the Earth? And how does that differ from what the Earth does with the sun? And for those of you out there who are physicists, you will understand that we have covered Newton's laws of motion, gravitational pulls, and orbital mechanics in language and ideas that are accessible to 10-year-olds. And that is really something. And it was a couple months later that Mom, always telling me what to do, mothers do that, but said, there's this environmental science camp that you should go to. You should go play in the marshes. And that sounded awful to me. But she said, well, it's taught by the same guy who did the astronomy class. I'm in. That's all there was to it. Now, I'm going to skip over most of the formal stuff of this Camp Hope, the science camp thing. I mean, teaching 11 and 12-year-olds to observe, to ask questions, form hypotheses, devise tests, perform experiments, form conclusions, communicate results is pretty heady stuff, but I'm going to skip over all of that, all of the formal educational stuff, to a really practical problem that somebody at an environmental science camp would have. And you've heard it alluded to several times already, that city and suburban kids in the middle of Swope Park who are away from home at night, maybe for the first time in their lives, are going to hear all sorts of things that are not dogs and cats. How do you inoculate small children against nighttime terror? Now, he didn't start with the barred owl. Now, that would have just impressed the terror on us just right away. But he started with the loud, friendly things. And Dick Dawson was the most enthusiastic whippoorwill this world has ever known. And you saw Barb Banfield dance to a bird. You've seen the birds here, you know, whippoorwill, just on and on and on. And he would talk about how enthusiastic they got, and they would get so enthusiastic that sometimes they would bounce right off the trees. I believed it. We went from there to the Chuck-Will Widow. My camp friends know the great horned owl, the one that goes hoo-hoo, the barred owl, you've heard. He would set us up. He would, you know, it's a Southern gentleman. It's Southern gentleman asking about the cook. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? Hoo-hoo-ah. Hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo-ah. Okay, well, that one had a different accent. That one's from Georgia. But then he would divide us up, and this half would be on one side of the hill, and this half would be the other side of the hill, and we would barred owls back and forth at each other, and make this fun. A couple years ago, in just the pandemic times, the suburbs became different places. And we had this strange sound in our backyard. Terrified my corgi, terrified my wife. You know, what is that? Well, it sounded like somebody had put an infant in the ground and had stomped on its stomach. Ah! Ah! Hey, you know what that is. Campers, what's that? Fox. I knew it was a fox. Ann knows a fox. Barb knows it's a fox. Anybody who was there knew it was a fox. We were not scared of these sounds because we knew what they were. Then what is the sound of the big giant who's coming through the lawn? Stomp in the leaves, stomp in the leaves, stomp in the leaves. It could be the giant coming to rip the tent off the platform and devour all of the campers. Or it could be a toad hopping from this spot to this spot through the leaves. He took us from exotic and strange and made it familiar and comfortable. Several years later, when I was on the camp staff, Dick gave us a peek behind the curtain. If, he told us during a staff training session, a camper brings you a leaf and asks you what it is, telling him what it is not helping him learn anything. You need to take that leaf and put it together with the camper's experience. Let's observe the leaf and see what we can find out about it. Were there nuts or berries or flowers on the tree? Well, acorns, yes. What kind of tree has acorns? Oh, that would be an oak. Well, tell me about the leaves. Are they pointed or are they smooth? Okay, they're pointed leaves, good. How about at the end? They're little kind of needle things coming off the end of it. Are they sharp? Yeah, they're sharp. This sharp, pointy thing. What's a sharp, pointy thing? Now, we may end up calling it a razor oak or a needle oak instead of a pin oak, but you get the idea. All right, since he's going to tell me to wind up, I've got to tell you real quick that he had observations about people, he had observations about ideas, and in fact, the last time I encountered Dick, he was ushering something at the Performing Arts Center. And at the Performing Arts Center, we were walking out. Dick was moving pretty slowly at this point, and Ellie had gone ahead to get the car, and Dick and I were talking about something. And he had ways of looking at ideas that were different from the way I looked at things. And I learned from him. As I told you, when we went up to the camp, Oak sign and turned right. Let me tell you that is the first time, only his time in my history, I had to move right to get to Dick Dawson's position. We came from different worlds. So when you look at Dick Dawson and you remember the man, you talked about the cameras and all the lenses, and I think that's an apt analogy because, to me, Dick Dawson was a lens. Dick Dawson helped me and other people look at the exotic and turn it into the familiar, and the familiar and turn it into the wonderful.
In his own words, Dick said this: "What I remember is not the facts or skills on which I was tested and graded. Some of them I can recall, but I probably would have learned them somehow, anyhow, if I needed to know them. One can only learn to love by loving and being loved in return. And I have loved teachers, colleagues, campers, students. To be a real teacher is to be touched in the head and the heart. If you can't be weird, what's the point of being? Does it matter? When I am gone and my students of today are old, I want some of them to remember me fondly and laugh. Maybe even read some of my poems and cry a little. But most of all, if they can pass on to their children and their friends and their students something of what I received, so that the love of Mazine and Martha and Marston and Harnett and Harvey, Paul and TBT, and their nameless mentors from ages past to ages yet to come echo the eternal song of progress of the human search. Ray Bragg said, "We may not mean much to the universe, but we mean everything to one another. Blessed be." And again, Mary Oliver echoes, "When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut, when death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and I look upon time as no more than an idea. And I consider eternity another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy and as singular, and each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending as all music does to silence, and each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to wind up simply having visited this world. Dick's final gift to his fellow human beings was to instruct that the physical remains for which he had no more use be given to the Willed Body program at KU Medical School to help create new knowledge and appreciation for the wonders of life. As in life, so in death, he shall become one of what the grateful students call our most patient teachers. In their letter of acknowledgement, the chair of the anatomy department said this: "Willing a body to science is one of the most personal and honorable gifts an individual can make. We are grateful for the selfless gift of education that each donor makes to this program, and our deepest gratitude goes out to families such as yours for honoring their loved ones' wishes." One day, many months from now, when no more wisdom can be found in his remains, Dick's ashes will be returned to his family so that they may perform for him the last duty of love, which is to lay aside with tenderness and reverence the broken vessel from which the essence of his being is long fled. We do not yet know when that hour will come and that task might be completed, but we trust on that day no less than this, that what was best in him is never lost, but streams forth to join the moving sea of creation once more. Whether death is the mind has envisioned everything, from shades beyond the mythic river to ineffable light and eternal joy. Whether individual consciousness survives, is transformed, or dissolves, no good person is ever dead when he is remembered in the minds of those who knew him with the affection that we treasure for the memory of Dick. Of this degree of immortality, there can be no doubt. And we can believe in the very fiber of our beings that the great promises of life are to be trusted. The persistence of nature and beauty, the power of honest love. Whatever remains of Dick's spirit is at peace and beyond all harm. As he was good, that goodness will be his guardian always. As he was loved, that love will attend him forevermore. Chip? Please, yes, absolutely.
Campers, we're going to close the campfire with green trees. Please come join me.
As we close virtually every campfire. Green trees around us, blue skies above, friends all around us, in a world filled with love. Taps sounding softly, hearts beating true, as campers say good night to you. Day is done, gone the sun, from the lake, from the hill, from the sky. All is well, safely rest. God is nigh, and good night.
Remember, it is in our lives and not our words that our faith must be read. Go, therefore, in peace and quietness, and yes, in joy. Live in love, die in love. It's that simple and that difficult, always.
Let it be a dance we do